He looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear. He said, "It doesn't have to hurt." I replied, "It already does." And then I reached inside, not the mirror, myself, through memory, through contradiction, through every lie I told to survive. I found him, not standing, not screaming, just curled in a corner of my mind. A boy, barely more than a whisper, and yet the most dangerous thing I had ever known. He looked up, eyes wide. "You're going to kill me?" I knelt. "No." "I'm you." I nodded. "I know." And I reached forward and held him and whispered, "But I don't need you anymore." And he shattered, quietly, like letting go of breath held too long. The mirror cracked, a line split across it, not because I broke it, but because he had been the reflection all along. The part of me that insisted on surrender, on safety, on finality. The voice that whispered, "Let it happen." Gone. No violence, no explosion, just choice. I stood alone, truly alone. No more alternate selves, no more shadows of thought, no more fear pretending to be survival instinct. And in that moment I realized I might not survive this, but I would never be finished. The hive returned. Not entirely, just enough. Walls groaned back into structure, lights flickered like they were trying to remember how to cast shadows. The breach pulsed like a wound, but it didn't close. It waited. The page was still open, still blank, but the cursor blinked slower now, like it knew. No one was coming to type the last line. I walked toward it, alone, unafraid, unfinished, because I understood something the cult never could. Survival isn't about avoiding death. It's about refusing to let someone else write your ending. There was music in the air, not sound, not instruments, just the idea of music. The hum of a chorus that hadn't yet begun, a tension across the skin, the taste of an unfinished note caught on the tongue. The song waited. It had always waited. I realized then, this wasn't a song I'd stumbled into. It was written for me. A final verse, unwritten, unspoken, incomplete, needing just one more syllable to collapse into truth. But I didn't speak. I walked, and the silence trembled. The breach had narrowed, no longer a gaping tear in space, now a spiral, tight, pulling inward, its edges warped with language, not runes, not code, typography, styles of font from different times, different histories, as if the universe were trying every possible formatting style to finish the page. 1 second Gothic, the next a broken low Gothic courier, then glyphs from a language so old the emperor himself had likely refused it. And in the center of the spiral, a single staff, 5 parallel lines, empty, waiting for notes. The song had never been about worship. It was about notation, composition. The cult wasn't summoning a god, they were writing one. I stepped forward. The staff pulsed. Lines began to ink themselves, one note, then another, but not melody. Memory. Each note was a decision I had made. Domna's laugh, rendered in a D minor. My first kill, a sharp that didn't belong. The moment I whispered no to a dying man's plea, held as a rest. The song was my life, all of it, filtered, compressed, transcribed, not for beauty, but for completion, and once it reached the end, it would close. The song would finish me, unless I refused to sing. The breach pulsed again. I felt it in my teeth, a pressure in the jaw, the sensation of a scream trying to crawl backward into the throat. The cult had called this the unwritten song, the final verse of absence. Their faith wasn't in a god, it was in a chord, one dissonant, impossible sound that could delete continuity itself, erase everything, even meaning, and the final note. Me. I understood that now. Every survivor they had tried before me had broken too early, sung too soon, but I had held out, which made me perfect. A final silence that understood melody, and so the staff waited, 5 lines, 4 beats, only one note missing. The breach rotated behind it like an eye blinking in reverse. Somewhere, in some other version, another Vel may have sung it, but not this one, not me. I stood before the page, stared at the blank line. The universe begged. Finish. Complete the cadence. Let entropy resolve. I opened my mouth and whispered nothing. Not silence. Nothing. Not even the suggestion of a note. And the staff shook. It couldn't resolve. It couldn't collapse because I refused to play. The world broke again, but not like before. No tearing, no glitch, just a pause. Like the universe waiting for a breath I refused to take. And I realized this was the final ritual. Not singing, not silence, refusal. The choir had tried to sing it, the cult had tried to transcribe it, the unbeing had tried to explain it, but all had failed because they believed in form. And form was the lie. It was refusal that ended gods, refusal that broke fate. And as long as I stood here, mouth closed, unplayed, the song could never end. I saw the page peel away. The staff crumbled, not burned, not erased, just drifted, like a musical note never struck, a melody never hummed. It collapsed into ink, and the ink ran backward, up the breach, into the walls, into the bones of the hive, into every chamber, every hall, every corpse that had ever sung a single word. And I heard them cry out, "He won't sing it." He broke the line. He left the note unwritten, and I whispered back, "Good." The breach shrank, collapsed into a single mark, a punctuation I didn't recognize, not a period, not a comma, not an ellipsis, something older, a pause that denied resolution. And from that mark, a final voice spoke, Domna, or maybe not, but it sounded like her, and it said, "Now you can remember me properly." The song was unwritten, the ritual unfulfilled, and in that failure, I was more complete than I had ever been, because some stories are better unfinished. The breach didn't close. It folded, collapsed into a mark no one could name, and with it the hive grew silent, not peaceful, not empty, just paused, like a hymn held in the throat, no breath, no release, just stillness. And I knew then I hadn't won, I hadn't survived, I had merely postponed. The walls trembled with recognition, not of me, of pattern. I passed a bulkhead, saw it crack, not structurally, symbolically. Behind the metal, a sigil surfaced, negative space, a circle without center, a star drawn without ink. It hadn't been painted, it had been remembered. The hive was remembering the cult, not learning, not discovering, recalling, as if it had always been part of the structure, just waiting for the right trigger. And I had triggered it. The vox lines hissed, static bloomed, not random, pulsed, repeating 4 times. Long, short, short, long, then again and again. I tried to ignore it, until I realized it was my heartbeat. The signal followed my rhythm, and every wall responded in kind. Pipes throbbed, lights dimmed in matching pattern. The structure had learned me, and now it was playing me back. I had become a chant, not a man, not even a story, just a cue in an unending ritual. And the ritual, it wasn't from this hive, it wasn't from this world, it was everywhere. A door opened, not with hydraulics, but with surrender, a triangle of black. At the center, a terminal, a flickering interface. Only 2 words hovered on its cracked display. Recognized node, and beneath it, infestation normal, not active, not breached, normal. As if cult presence was an accepted part of the system, like humidity or entropy. The terminal blinked once, then spilled its records onto the walls. Not logs, not text, just maps, world after world, system after system. Dots bloomed in red, old colonies, lost fortresses, quarantine zones, all marked by that same blank symbol. A circle without center. I saw Gathis Prime, Nyx Crucible, Darnath's Hollow, even Terra's outer data stacks, scratched records with negative time signatures. It wasn't a spread, it was a reveal. The cult hadn't moved, it had been discovered, or more accurately, unforgotten. And the realization hit me like a cracked lens. We never stopped them, we never noticed them, because they weren't invading, they were native. A scream echoed through the ductwork, not real, not present, just memory echoing through unreality. Domna's voice, or maybe mine. I couldn't tell anymore. It shouted, "They were always there." And then a whisper, far softer, "And so were you." I fell against the wall, felt the pulse again, felt my name crawl through the metal, not spoken, not voiced, just known. The cult didn't convert people, it discovered them. And when it looked into me, it didn't see resistance, it saw resonance. I punched the terminal, glass shattered, nothing changed. The maps kept glowing, the symbols kept drifting. Even the broken screen continued to display, infestation normal, and beneath it, you are a reference copy. I backed away. My legs didn't want to move. My spine didn't bend correctly. Something was wrong. My reflection in the terminal didn't match my movement. It blinked first and smiled. And for the briefest moment, I saw a version of me mouth the words. We were never separate. Then, vanish. The hive began to descend. Not floors, not elevators, just gravity reasserting down in the wrong direction. The world folded inward. The temple beneath the hive re-emerged, a structure built from forgotten things. And I heard the sound again, that terrible almost choir. But this time, it wasn't the cultists singing. It was the walls, the floor, the air, the concept of space itself humming a single repeating phrase. We exist in the gaps. It was a hymn of subtraction. Every verse removed a piece of meaning, and in its place, a space for the cult to thrive. I stood still, not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood. This wasn't a religion, not even a belief system. It was an error, a piece of cognitive malware so deeply embedded in the human condition that even the Inquisition couldn't see it for what it was. The cult had no name, because names are definitions, and definitions allow detection. They survived by never becoming identifiable, never becoming unique, only visible in reflection. And now, that reflection was me. I dropped to my knees, felt the stone beneath my fingers. It wasn't stone anymore. It was flesh, written in glyph. The hive was writing itself backward into the ritual, not summoning anything, just reconfiguring itself to suit the absence it had housed all along. And in the center of the temple, a mirror, not of glass, of context. And in it, I saw terror, the real terror, the one still safe, still distant. And then behind it, a crack, thin, slow, but growing. And I whispered, it's already there too. I stared into the mirror. It did not show me. It showed what I had once pretended to be, a man of reason, a servant of the throne, an interrogator whose job was to extract truth from darkness, to wield fear as scalpel and shield. But now the reflection was wrong. Wearing my uniform, speaking with my voice, but blinking just a moment too early, it tilted its head, smiled, and whispered, you were never interrogating them. You were decoding yourself. The temple pulsed beneath me. Walls throbbed like muscle. Pipes wept scripture in reverse. Blood that spelt nothing but meant everything. The last Vox unit hissed to life. No signal, just tone. A feedback loop of memory. My voice, Domna's scream. 100 names I had extracted from broken psyches now feeding back into my ear as one question. Why are you still wearing that title? I looked down. The rosette still clung to my chest, still marked me as Inquisition, as interrogator Sarin Vel. I reached for it, and it crumbled. Not metal, not forged, just contextual placeholder, a title never fully earned. That's when the mirror spoke again. Not words, my voice, layered with the others. Each memory I'd interrogated, each heretic, each mutant, each mind cracked open under order of the throne, now speaking as one. You were never outside it. You were the final interview. You are the only lie that remains. I stepped back, not in fear, in understanding. My entire career had been a hall of echoes, every answer a reflection of my own questions. I hadn't extracted truth, I'd curated narrative, ensured endings aligned with sanctioned templates. But this wasn't an ending, because the cult didn't have one. I heard a door open, but there was no door, just a change in pressure, and from the void stepped me, again, but not fractured, not alternate, just corrected. He looked like I wanted to, how I'd trained to look, eyes clear, posture clean, rosette still intact. He said nothing, just gestured to a chair that hadn't been there before. I sat, because I understood. This was the final debriefing, and I was both subject and interrogator. I asked, "What is your name?" He replied, "That depends." "What answer lets you survive?" I laughed. The sound was strange in my mouth, not bitter, not joyous, just human. The other Vel leaned forward. "You want to know why the cult didn't need gods?" I nodded. He gestured to the temple. "Because gods are loud, gods are seen, believed in, worshipped." He pointed to his chest. "They needed something quieter, something that could become." And then he whispered, "They became questions." I understood. The cult wasn't a structure. It was a question you couldn't stop asking, a ritual of recursive thought, a puzzle that refused solutions. And once you asked it, you couldn't forget it, you couldn't leave it, because you had already joined. He stood, and as he did, his uniform dissolved. Rosette peeled into ash, eyes blackened, not with hate but with absence. He said, "You're not Sarin Vel anymore. You're the version who kept asking. You're the page they couldn't write." And then he walked into the mirror, became reflection again. No sound, no drama, just placement, like he'd never left, and the mirror cleared. Now it showed a corridor, Terra's data vaults, a custodian walking, looking up, confused. And I understood. The breach had touched the throne world, and I had no title left to stop it. I rose. The chair vanished. The room peeled away, like set dressing from a stage long abandoned. The temple folded inward, not destroyed, just archived. I walked into a corridor that wasn't real, just a memory of a hallway I'd once interrogated someone in, and every door whispered as I passed. Interrogator Vel, Inquisitorial agent, servant of the God Emperor. Each name fell off me like rust, because the truth was simple. I had never belonged to the Inquisition. I was merely their narrative convenience, a vessel that fit their structure until I outlived my purpose. Now I was the question they couldn't ask. A light flickered overhead. I looked up, saw nothing, then everything. Domna's smile, her voice whispering from behind a veil of static. "Did you think your badge made you immune?" I laughed again, shook my head. "Never." And she said, "Then why did you keep wearing it?" I paused, looked at my hands, empty, no weapons, no sanction, no identity, and I whispered back, "Because it was the only thing left I could lose." She didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence told me everything. I reached a final corridor, not marked, not named, just waiting. At the far end, a door, rusting, opened slightly. A light behind it blinking in perfect time with my pulse, and above the door, carved into the wall, not in words, but in absence. "This is the room where names end." I stepped forward. My boots left no echo, because there was no more world to reverberate. Inside the room, a terminal, the last one. And on the screen, "Welcome, Interrogator Vel. Do you wish to begin your final report?" And for the first time in my life, I said, no. There was no ceremony, no rupture in the stars, no demon host tearing open the soil. Just a crack, thin, invisible to most, but there, above the highest point of Terra's sky, beyond the void shields, above the golden crust of the throne world's sanctified crust, a fracture, a hairline fault in reality itself. I saw it through the mirror, saw it not with eyes, but with pattern recognition, because what broke wasn't the sky, it was the memory of its integrity. I stepped away from the terminal. The prompt still blinked. "Do you wish to begin your final report?" I ignored it. My name had long stopped fitting. There was no Vel left, only the residue of questions that wouldn't resolve. The reflection in the glass had faded, not to black but to blank, not absence, just awaiting content. Like it expected me to write the next scene, but I was tired of endings. I wanted to see what happened if no one finished the story. That's when the gravity changed. It didn't pull harder. It hesitated, just for a second. The entire hive structure, what was left of it, shuddered, and every system paused. Like the machine spirit of the world was trying to remember what direction down was. And in that pause, I felt the crack above Terra breathe. It was not wind, not atmosphere, just pressure leaking from another kind of place. Then I heard the first reports, not from the Vox, not from any official channel. They came through the walls, in whispers, thousands of them, layered, stacked, and they all said the same thing: Terra is not real. The first time I'd heard those words, it was a cultist. He'd smiled through broken teeth, laughed even as his skull melted under psycho pressure, and whispered, Terra is a shared hallucination. The throne is its anchor, and it's breaking. At the time, I wrote it off as heresy-induced psychosis. Now I saw the same phrase appearing across data slates that had never connected to the Hive's network, on Auspex scans, on cogitator screens that weren't even powered. The message wasn't transmitted, it was inferred. The cult didn't plant it, the Imperium had been growing it all along. Somewhere in the orbit above Terra, a Mechanicus relay station blinked offline, then another and another, not attacked, not sabotaged, they just reconsidered their function. I saw the reports from 1,000 miles away, mirrored in the structure of the hive I walked, as if reality across sectors had begun to fold to match. No invasion, no armies, just contextual drift. Terror remained visible, but the idea of it, the sanctity, the certainty, that was leaking. I felt it in my spine, like I'd forgotten a word I used every day. Something simple, like sky or home. I walked to the last viewing deck, not a cathedral, not a watchtower, just a cracked platform once used to measure cloud toxicity. Now it measured something else. I looked up and saw it. The crack, still small, still barely perceptible, but not dark. It shimmered, like something on the other side was laughing without sound. A warp presence. Number warp phenomena scream. They bleed noise and sulfur. This question mark. This was quiet, and in that quiet I heard it again. We've always been here. I collapsed, not from pain, from recognition. The cult wasn't spreading, it wasn't even revealing, it was reminding, and now the galaxy was remembering incorrectly. Terror was not being corrupted, it was being rewritten, layer by layer, history by history, until the imperial truth gave way to a different truth. A void-born faith that never asked for belief, only realignment. And I realized we'd never purged the heresy. We'd only built the throne high enough to keep it from sight, but the base was always hollow, always waiting to echo. The Vox sputtered to life one last time, this time not static, a voice, clear, panicked. It was from a relay on Luna. We're seeing duplication. The stars are copying. The sky's file structure is repeating itself. Are we inside a simulation? Did something? Then silence, then a new message. Same voice, same ID, different tone. Calm, too calm. No irregularities detected. The God Emperor protects. Everything is stable. And in the background, the same hum I'd heard in the temple, that unwritten song playing through him. I backed away from the Vox, realizing the infection wasn't in flesh, it was in certainty. And terror was certainty made manifest. It was the one thing that was never supposed to fall, that's why they started there. Because if terror can be edited, then everything can. I walked away from the terminal. No alarms sounded, no klaxons screamed, because even those systems were unsure now, unsure if I was an enemy, or just another echo of the hymn. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe the story had already reached its author. Domna's voice came again, soft now, like memory trying not to hurt. You know what comes next. I nodded, not to her, to myself, because she wasn't giving instruction. She was remembering forward. I asked, did you see it too? She answered, I was born in it. And for the first time, I believed her, not just as a cultist, not as an ally, but as someone who had walked one step further than I had. She had reached the crack in the sky before me, and instead of resisting, she had learned to live there. The final report page fluttered behind my eyes. The script demanded it. End the log. Classify the breach. Mark the planet. Purge if necessary. Request exterminatus if unrecoverable. But the buttons no longer responded because those protocols depended on a map, and the map no longer matched the terrain. Terror couldn't be marked because it had already marked us. I stared up at the crack one more time. It stared back, and in the silence between us I whispered, "You're not outside, you're underneath." And the crack, it smiled. The breach no longer bled. It pulsed, a low, steady rhythm that mimicked my heart rate, until I realized it was the other way around. I was mimicking it. Every breath, every blink, every lingering thought in the corners of my mind aligned to its hum. And above me, the crack in the sky no longer shimmered. It watched. It didn't need to expand. It had enough now. It had me. I stood before the last functional data core, not on Hive Shrike, not even on a world I recognized. Just a location. An echo of an old interrogation chamber reconstructed from fragments of memory and intent. The Vox unit beside it was intact, and above it, log entry, 14 Sarin Vel, final report, attempt. Status, incomplete. I blinked. Log 14, my report, I wasn't the first. I stepped closer, opened the files, and there they were. Log entry 01, audio corrupted. Log entry 02, blank, Vox malfunctions. Log entry 3, incomplete, stops at 72 seconds. Log entry 4, deleted by unknown protocol. Log entry 5, no, only word recorded. Log entry 06, file loops, cannot be closed. Log entry 07 to 13, all identical, each one ends mid-sentence. I scrolled, watched my own words dissolve again and again. Each time I tried to leave a record, something intervened, or maybe I did. I sat down at the recorder. The seat molded to me like I'd never left it. The system chimed once, waiting, expecting, and I understood. I had sat here before, not once, not twice, 13 times. Each attempt to capture the final truth ended the same way. With forgetting, I began to record, and the room darkened, not from power loss, but focus. It was as if the space itself held its breath, needing to know what I'd say this time. Maybe this was the time I'd get it right, or maybe that was what the cult needed me to believe. Report begins, I said aloud. My voice sounded tired, distant, but real. For the record, this is Sarin Vel, former interrogator of the Inquisition, assigned to Hive Shrike 4 to investigate suspected warp cult infiltration. I paused, looked around. Nothing interrupted, no static, no laughter, no singing mirror, just the hum of the machine. I continued. Subject, Reality Breach Alpha, cult presence identified, operating outside established warp doctrine, theology unclear, no overt worship, no summoned entities. My hands clenched, words felt hollow. I was reciting, not remembering, and then something broke. The machine laughed, not mechanically, not audibly, just conceptually. A tickle in the bones. An idea that didn't belong to me slipped into the structure of my sentence and whispered, "You always stop here." The log flickered, paused at 132. I shook my head. Number not this time. I pressed forward. Clarification. The cult does not seek domination. They do not seek to summon or feed the warp. They are erasing cause, erasing purpose. They are subtracting meaning. The screen blurred, text warped, but I kept speaking. I had to, even if it only reached me again later, even if I forgot. Some part of me had to remember. I have seen multiple versions of myself, I said. I have interrogated them. They have interrogated me. They always fail. They always forget. This message is for the version who makes it further. If you're hearing this, if you're reading this, then maybe you're different. Maybe you finally understood. And then, silence. Not failure, not deletion, just a soft tone. The system prompted, "Would you like to leave a final statement?" I blinked. 13 times before I had failed here. Now I knew why. The final statement wasn't about me. It was the question the cult had been writing through me all along. And this was the blank where I was supposed to answer it. I leaned forward, voice trembling, whispered, "I'm not the final version." "You are. This isn't a report, it's a warning to myself. The cult never started. It doesn't spread. It was always present. I think it might be memory itself. A parasite inside our records, a structure that uses us to store itself." The vox trembled. Static brushed the edges. I pushed harder. The breach doesn't need to grow. It just waits for belief to catch up, for enough people to remember the same wrong thing. And then, silence. I waited for deletion, but the file held. The system prompted, "Save log," and I said, "Yes." The machine paused. Saving took longer than it should, like the universe itself had to consider whether the file should exist. When it finished, a new line appeared. Log entry 14 complete. I smiled, but only for a moment, because below it, log entry 15, begin. I stared at the prompt, blinked once, twice, and then I realized I was already forgetting what I had just said. The breach blinked. Somewhere, light inverted, the stars rearranged. No thunder, no warp, just misalignment. Reality had grown tired of its own structure. It no longer needed us to record the lie. It had internalized it, made it default, and I knew the next version of me would find this log, would read it, would think it was new, would believe he was the first, and when he reached the end, he would be offered the same choice. Begin. I stood from the terminal, looked at the world beyond the broken glass. It was already changing, not crumbling, just recontextualizing. The mountains had shifted, angles now curved in ways that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. The sun no longer cast light, just probability. I whispered, "Somewhere, someone is remembering this wrong, and that's enough." The cult doesn't need victory, it needs repetition, a chorus of failure stacked so deep it sounds like truth. And I was just the latest note, maybe the last, but probably not. I left the terminal, not out of defiance, not in triumph, but because it no longer mattered. The log would wait for the next me, or the next you, because this isn't about one person, never was. It's a structure, a recursive shape that looks like understanding. A whisper looped in silence, a book that only opens when you're not looking. You think I'm being poetic. I'm not. I'm being precise, because the cult is not a group, it's a condition. I stepped through the corridor, or what used to be one. Now it was a hallway made of options. Each wall flickered, versions of rooms I'd never been in, moments I hadn't lived, futures that hadn't occurred, all of them branching from the same root. That first question, the one no inquisitor wants to ask, the one every heretic smiles at before death. What if we were always wrong? Not about chaos, not about the warp, but about meaning, about the idea that there even is such a thing as truth. I saw Domna again, not in flesh, in echo. She walked beside me in a corridor neither of us built. She didn't speak, didn't need to. I understood her now. She hadn't joined the cult, she'd been revealed by it. Just like me, just like everyone who made it this far. We're not converts, we're not victims. We're just people who remember the wrong thing at the wrong time. And once you do, there's no going back. You don't join the cult, you realize you were always inside it. Terror no longer appeared in the sky, at least not that terror. The version up there now shimmered in too many dimensions, orbiting nothing, casting no gravitational pull, yet somehow still felt heavier. The stars had rewritten their orbits to reflect a script never published. Constellations now formed glyphs, not in low Gothic, not in demonic cant, but in intent. The galaxy wasn't communicating, it was compiling. Each memory, each false interrogation, each looped report, all now structured as a single, recursive phrase, "You're already in it." I returned to the breach, the original one, or maybe just a representation of it, a floating tear in possibility. It didn't pulse, didn't scream, it just waited. For me, number, for the final note. Because this wasn't a war, it was a song a chant built from refrains of forgotten names and unfiled reports. And I was the unresolved verse, the closing whisper that never gets sung. So the song keeps playing, not louder, just longer. A whisper tickled my ear. Domna, number my own voice, an earlier version, the one who recorded log entry 7. I remembered now. He had said, "If you're reading this, it's already too late." I had thought that was a metaphor, but it wasn't. The cult doesn't attack, it doesn't destroy, it waits for acknowledgement. And once you give it, once you try to explain it, define it, record it, you feed it, and now, you're part of the loop. I placed my hand on the edge of the breach, expected heat, cold, pain, got none, only recognition, the way an old coat remembers your shape. It welcomed me, not as a visitor, but as a returning idea. And in the core of it, I saw you, not metaphor, not paranoia, just the realization, this story was never for me. I'm just the courier, the pen. You're the one holding the page, reading the symbols, reconstructing the breach with your attention, and that means you're in it now. You'll start to notice it soon, the way your memory skips, the way certain things feel like they happened more than once, the way you pause mid-thought because something behind your eyes hums a tune that's never been played. You'll dream of cities that don't exist, see rooms in your house that you never entered, hear someone call your name in a voice that sounds just like yours. That's how it starts. Not with madness, but with a question you can't stop asking. Even now, I see it behind your eyes. You've already asked it, haven't you? What if it's real? You want to deny it. That's healthy, that's human. But here's the thing, you made it this far. You read everything, and that means part of you, some small, undeniable fraction, wants it to be true, wants this to be more than a story, wants the void to be real, because if it is, then maybe all your wrong memories mean something. Maybe the faces you see in crowds, the ones you swear you recognize but don't, aren't random. Maybe they're just earlier versions of yourself, trying to forget, trying to warn you, failing. You are the final reader, the last variable. The breach didn't stop at Hive Shrike. It didn't stop at terror. It followed intent. And now, you've joined the ritual, just by understanding, just by reading, just by remembering. You are log entry 15, no title, no name, just a final report waiting to be written. So write it, or don't. Either way, you'll be back. If you felt something shift inside you hearing this, don't ignore it. Scroll back to the beginning, listen to it again, and this time, watch what changes. Because the breach isn't fiction, it's format. And now, you're the next chapter.